Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Freethought in Florida. Freethought in Florida is a production of the Atheist Community of Polk County, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. I'm Sarah Ray. I'm one of the directors of the ACPC. The ACPC has restarted some select in-person events as the state continues along its reopening path, perhaps foolishly. Saturday mornings, we have a team that works with Street Warriors of Central Florida, packing and handing out meals to people experiencing homelessness in downtown Lakeland. And on Sunday mornings, we'll be in Auburndale working on our Adopt a Road. It's 2.2 miles of Old Dixie Highway in Fussell's Corner. Every other Saturday, we plan to be helping deliver boxes of food to people throughout the county who are otherwise unable to access traditional services. The ACPC joins a coalition of organizations to make this possible. It's called It Takes a Village, and I'm really impressed with what we've been able to do with that in such a short time. If you're interested in joining any of our events, you can find all the details on our Facebook and Meetup at polkatheists.org. And you don't have to be an atheist to come to our events, of course. Just let's do some good out in our communities. No arguments, no preaching. Let's just put helping others as our first priority. Stay tuned, though, because it looks like COVID cases are on the rise again. Thank you, Florida, for reopening super fast. So there may be some changes ahead as we watch the cases come up for those. So joining me today for this episode is Phil Session. Everybody grab a cup of coffee or something to drink. This is a long list of Phil is the busiest atheist, the busiest volunteer in atheism, I think. Phil is the vice president and volunteer coordinator for the Freethinkers Association of Central Texas. He's also the head organizer / coordinator for Austin Atheist Helping the Homeless, and serves on the board of directors for Recovering from Religion and Foundation Beyond Belief. I wore my Foundation Beyond Belief shirt here today.
Oh, nice.
Let's see. My God, what else do you do, Phil? Phil previously served as vice president and community service coordinator for the Atheist Community of Austin, was a co-host for the Atheist Experience, producer of Godless Bitches 2.0, and served as a lay leader for the Atheist Humanist Meeting on Lackland Air Force Base. Please welcome. Join me in feeling woefully inadequate and welcoming to the show Phil Session. Phil, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. I really appreciate it. I like the fact that you have this paper printout thing.
Well, there's no way I'd have been able to remember all of that. That's for sure. So how are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Right now, it's definitely busy. It seems like everything has kicked in to overdrive. My regular job that I actually pay bills with kicked into overdrive.
How do you have time for? Hold on. How do you have time for a regular job?
You have to fit it in those slices of time that you have. Just put it in there. I'm working from home at this point in time, but still, with all of the different organizations as well, the nonprofit organizations that I'm with, also kicking up into some kind of overdrive in different ways, of course. But it seems like there's so much going on all the time. And I know on last month, it was just like, oh, that's just too much. But now it's getting a little better, a little more manageable for me. But it was just so much going on, which is a good thing.
Right.
For at least for me.
Yes.
I appreciate that, but it was a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's towards the end, maybe we'll come back and talk about some of this volunteering in organizations and stuff. And like COVID presented us with a lot of challenges on, how people are losing their jobs and needing help more than ever, and how we respond to all of that. But it feels really weird to be happy about anything right now. But happy Pride,
right?
It's Pride Month.
It's very different from the past and Pride months where, this be going out to Pride parades and festivals and, all that kind of stuff and just all the things that I've done for years. And this year was just like, yeah, that's none of that.
Nope.
None of it.
It's so sad. I saw, in my Facebook memories, is a good and bad thing, right? I saw this past weekend, we were at our local Pride set up for the first year as the Atheist Community of Polk County, and not this year, but they did reschedule it to October. But then, you just see, because Florida's one of these stupid states that was like, hey, let's reopen early. And I'm worried for the future of what the fall's going to look like. And I hope that October comes and we're healthy enough to be able to get together and have Pride.
Yeah, that I've heard a lot of prides. Like some prides were going virtual. I heard that was a thing that some folks were doing. But this year, I think it was just last week, it was supposed to be my first time going out to California. I was going to go to Los Angeles Pride for the first time. My first time in California, first time in LA, of course. If I've never been to California, I haven't been to LA. But I was like, I had this whole plan out. Like, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to take a road trip. And maybe one of my friends will come along with me, and then we'll just drive right over there. I've driven to Vegas before, so it was exciting. But as all this kicked off in March, it was just like, I don't think that's going to happen. But we'll see. Remain hopeful. And as time rolled on, it was like, yeah, this is just not happening. But okay.
Well, I don't know. I've been among the queer folk petitioning to not have Pride in the South in the middle of fucking summer. So there's that. Like, June in Florida is the worst time to have any kind of thing at the park.
I feel you.
Yep.
I feel
you do.
This Texas heat does not play. And at least like San Antonio was conscious enough to say, we'll do the Pride Parade part in the evening time. But even at 8 o'clock, it's still 90 some odd degrees. It's still hot. It's still humid. And I'm just like, oh, okay.
Yep.
So, but I feel you on that. I feel that.
Right. And so, well, then yesterday we had this Supreme Court decision. We can go ahead and stop and chew on that for a moment. I woke up. And every day I wake up and I check my phone thinking, oh, well, what's the dumpster fire today? Like what additional salt in the wound is there? Because it seems to only get worse day after day after day. And I caught this very surprising Supreme Court ruling about the Title VII interpretation on employment and what gender on the basis of sex, does that cover gender and sexual orientation? And it does. What?
Like what? I was shocked. Yeah. I was absolutely shocked because when this case started, it's months and months ago now, but that was the concern. It's like there's a conservative leaning court now.
Yeah.
They have enough to say that no, you're not covered. You're certainly not covered. If somebody fires you expressly for you being gay, for being a trans person, like it was so jaw-dropping that this case was going, and it's just like, what is going to happen now? Yeah. Because of this fight for more conservative-leaning majority, what do we do? What happens if they come and say no? Like what happens then?
Right.
And how does life change? Like, how do I change my behavior? How do other people have to change themselves if people know that they can just do it? And so I was so concerned, and so that it shocked me when I saw someone sharing it, and I'm just like, oh, I can't believe it. Look at this. And I put a post on Facebook, and it started off as holy effing crap.
I had to look at 3 or 4 different sources to make sure I wasn't being punked. Like, is this for real? Because you're right. Like when we got Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, I think we were all like, guys, just don't bring any cases. Just don't bring the cases because this could go badly against us, and overturning Supreme Court decisions is a rare thing, and stare decisis is important, and but you don't, yeah. So I was not optimistic at all, but I'm thrilled that it's happened, that it's been ruled properly, because I don't know if folks have heard me opine about this yet or not, but there's sort of 2 different ways to interpret the 1964 Civil Rights Act, right? Which is the letter of the law of these are the categories that they wrote down, and that's what they meant. And the word sex means biological penis, vagina, and then there's the intent interpretation, which is that the Civil Rights Act was meant to prevent people from being fired or loss of housing or refusal service, whatever, on the basis that they belong to a category of people. And that category, the list of categories should be fluid. And we shouldn't have to necessarily get Congress to sit down and write in a little caret, sexual orientation, gender identity, which they should have done a long time ago. And, maybe they should still do, but I'm glad that they ruled it on sort of the intent rather on the specific language.
Yeah, it was definitely something to read. I still need to read the full opinion. I've read bits and pieces of it. I pulled it up on the Supreme Court website, but it's always interesting to see the rationale that was used. Now, this particular decision was written by Gorsuch himself, which, surprised the hell out of me. Just to be perfectly frank. But I liked some of the language that, he used to write that. I mean, I'm sure he had helpers and, legal assistants or, people in the office that helped get this stuff together. But there was one part that concerned me. Wow, what are words? There's a part that concerned me. So this was the Bostock versus Clayton County was the actual case. And towards the end of the regular court opinion, so not the dissents or anything, but the regular court opinion, this is on the 32nd page of the opinion. It was brought up to me. It was posted on Facebook, I think by Geoff Blackwell, the attorney for American Atheists. And he referenced that it has this kind of caveat. It doesn't change the opinion, of course, but Gorsuch also throws in there the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, and referencing that because RFRA operates as a kind of statute, I'm quoting here, displacing the normal operations of other federal laws, it might supersede Title VII's commands in appropriate cases. That little window is still a concern for me, because it's like if somebody wants to now and they have a state that has a RFRA law amongst themselves, let alone the federal one, okay, well, we're going to take a case up now and say that because we can't discriminate based on sex or based on sex, so to speak, on sexual orientation, to be a little clearer, that's infringing my religious rights. You're infringing on my religious right. I am a small business owner, or in the case of Hobby Lobby, a closely held corporation, and we should have our religious liberties upheld, even to the effect and detriment of our employees. And so that is concerning. I hate that it was just kind of written in, just boom, right there at the end. Like, let me let you know that this is not all good. This might come and bite you, but not in this case.
Right. And as it has, and then we see like this is a win. And I mean, I had some people commenting on my Facebook that were like, I'm not excited about this. The timing of it is suspect. Like all of this, it's fine, but I don't feel great about it. And I thought, right, like this is a good thing, and we have so much more to do. When you look at all of the things that Project Blitz is pushing, that the adoption, right? Adoption agencies that have deeply held religious beliefs can just say no to gay people or non-Christian people or whatever. There's so much more coming, but the fact that what we all knew is a conservative-leaning Supreme Court came down on the right side of this one. I don't know what that means for the future. Like, what timeline are we even in?
Like, how bad do things have to be when, a victory gets done in this way, and you still have to question it, like, but is it really? Like, we got to really think about it. And I hate that. But as I put on my Facebook post, at the end of the post, I was like, I'll take it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because there's been so many things. There's just been so much that has happened, and so many things that are being rolled back, and protections being rolled back, and the HUD and the military, and there's all these different pieces that. And the other question is, what if this went the wrong way? What world will we be facing right now? Yeah. And so I will take the effing win.
Yeah. I mean, within a week, right? Within a 7-day window, the Trump rolling back trans health protections under the ACA. And then this, like, so I get that a lot of people are feeling a lot of kind of ways right now.
Right.
And so, yes, keep up the good fight, but let's take a moment, and like, this is a good thing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about you and your journey, sort of through and out of religion. You were raised in Texas, bless your heart, and in 2 church homes, one Baptist and the other a Free Church of God in Christ. Take us through what that was like growing up and what eventually led to your awakening.
So, yeah, as you said, there were 2 church homes. I've heard a lot of folks when they get married that they will like consolidate their church homes, that type of thing. But in this case, it stayed separate. My mom really liked her church. That was a church that her mom went to. And on my dad's side, yeah, a lot of my family was the church on my dad's side in the Free Church of God in Christ. And so a lot of the choir and a lot of the folks in the pews were my family. And so there were these 2 church homes, very different. Like a lot of it was overlap, but there were some pieces that were different. So when I was younger, I recognized that the F. church did not have a baptismal pool. And on the Baptist side, well, that's a big thing. It's a huge mural, and it looks so nice. It's so beautiful. And, there's this immaculate thing up there, and like this picturesque vision of a forest with the stream going down, and the stream meets with the pool down there at the bottom. And it's this big thing. But on F. side, there was just a big, I don't know what to call it. Like your stage when you have those curtains. It's like a little curtain back there. And I was like, well, obviously they must have their pool behind there. And so when service was over, I took my little cheeky behind up there, even though I wasn't supposed to be doing this. But I was like, let me just take a peek behind the curtain, because obviously there has to be the baptismal pool, but why isn't it on display? So I looked back there and it was just storage.
Oh, wow.
And it was just storage stuff. And I'm like, well, where's the thing? And I remember bringing that up to my mom, and she, as I'm older now, I understand what she was trying to thread the needle and make sure she wasn't stepping on others' toes, but she was just along the lines of, oh, well, not everyone does, the baptismal type of thing that we're used to, because I went through that process and dunked and got water in my freaking nose, and that was a very miserable process, and the water was cold. Ugh. But anyway, sidebar. But it was the F. side definitely had some unique things about it. Like they were much more music focused, which I enjoyed that side over the Baptist side. But the things that I didn't like, especially on F. side, was like they had this large poster, the Lake of Fire poster, to be specific. And this Lake of Fire poster was on prominent display right there on the right-hand side of the church behind the organ. And they had all the things that would get you cast into the Lake of Fire, or at the very least that you were deserving of the Lake of Fire if you did any of these things. And they were ranged from, of course, homosexuality, got to have that on the wall, and adultery, but also just things like lying. And as a child, seeing that and kind of going through my mind, like, have I ever told a lie? It was a little daunting for me, and it made it a lot more real for me. I'm like, wow, like I deserve this, this huge thing. This was not a small post. This wasn't some little 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. This was like a 7-foot behemoth thing on the wall. And so it was quite daunting for me. And I remember growing up with that and having dreams about that, the whole 9 yards. But as I grew older, I started recognizing my sexuality and who I was attracted to, which was, not folks that identified as female. And so it was just like, well, okay, this is interesting. And I played it off. I pushed it to the side. Didn't tell anybody. Oh, can't do that.
Oh, no.
Child, can't do that. Lake of Fire poster. So I kept it bottled up to myself for almost all the way through high school. Like, once you come out, family members like, oh, I can tell. When you were 3 years old, you did that one thing, and I was like, well, I knew it. I knew it back then, but whatever. But yeah, I hit high school and really started to come to terms with the fact that I was indeed gay, and I had this big internal fight, I suppose. And I didn't feel comfortable going to my parents. I didn't feel comfortable going to pastors. Remember, Lake of Fire, that type of thing. And so my mind was like, something is wrong, and I need to wrestle with this because I'm still a believer, but now I'm wrestling with this. So now what? And going back and forth between myself, I started doing research on different aspects of the Bible. And basically, I came to the conclusion that this Bible has had a lot of human hands in it. There's been a lot of hands in the cookie jar, so to speak, in the creation of this thing. So I am a child of God, and I was made that way. Therefore, he made me exactly the way that he intended. So I was able to go along with that, call myself Christian, and went on about my life for years until I hit college. And while I was at university, being exposed to so many different faiths. And I remember going to a birthday party for one of my friends, and they were Hindu. And when I went into their house, and they cooked this wonderful meal with curry that was the hottest ish I have ever experienced in my life. But I'm looking around, and they have all these little all the different types of gods, and they're just posted around. They're even on some of the food packaging that they had. It was just everywhere. And coming to realize that they believe what they believe in the same way that I do, and theirs is so different than what I experience, and yet they're just as confident and feel the same way as I do. And so that made me kind of start re-examining my own beliefs to say, well, how in the world am I sure that I'm right if they believe they're right and they are way different than what I'm used to? Like, I'm monotheistic, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting over here, I'm looking at just a pantheon of different guys that do different things and have different roles. And it's just like, what? So that's what kind of really thrust me on that path to start looking into how I was justifying my own beliefs.
That's interesting. I grew up in a town of, people are tired of hearing this story. I grew up in a town of 1,400 people in the middle of nowhere, Illinois. It was like corn, soybeans, and white people as far as the eye could see. Church on every corner. And so we all went to church. Obviously, everybody went to church, and there was a point where I was like on track to be go into the ministry, and I really thought that I was called to go into, and then I moved out on my own. But also I was dealing with all of this trans stuff that I didn't know what to call it at the time. There weren't words for it. We were jokes on the Jerry Springer show, and so like moving away and seeing the world a little bit. And that's the kind of stuff that, like, I became an apatheist for a while. I grew up in a kind of a vanilla Christian church, and then I ended up at a Church of God with for a girl that I was seeing, and that was like culture shock to me. But it was at that Church of God that I was doing like a one-on-one Bible study with the youth pastor, and we were going through, and he had me writing down like all the truths and the promises. And the more I read, the less I believed, like it was one of those cases of like, wow, this is bullshit. I just don't believe this stuff anymore. And they were the kind of place that, like, if you didn't show up one Sunday, he would call me 2-3 times a day, every day. Where you been? Wow. Everything okay? Sure missed you on Sunday. Hope to see you this Sunday. That kind of place.
Good night.
Yep. And so I just kind of walked away from it and didn't care until I moved to Florida and transitioned, and all of that stuff was going on. And then North Carolina's House Bill 2 happened. And that was like the catalyst for me to be like, okay, I don't believe in it, but I have to care about it again because this shit is hurting my people. And I can't let that happen. And that's when I kind of became the atheist activist, I guess. Like, that's when I entered my angry atheist phase. So, so talk a little bit about I think I've heard you talk about this on AXB once or twice, but what do you think was more difficult for you in your situation in life, in your social circles, dealing with the loss of a God belief and coming out as atheist, or dealing with your sexuality and coming out as gay?
So, yeah, I think I have mentioned it here and there. So, for my own, like, there's two parts to it. There's the part of my reconciling with it myself, and also the coming out process to family. And for the gay side of things, I remember wrestling that for a much longer period of time. This is when I was a believer, like the whole time.
Right.
So it was just this ongoing thing of kind of going back and forth. Like, is this really the case? Is this just, lusting off of someone, and I'm really supposed to be here? Because I had girlfriends before. This is elementary, so I'm not sure how much that counts.
Right.
Oh my god! And I still remember their names. This is so funny. It's super funny, but
it's back when you liked people. I like you.
But
my 10-year-old said that to me the other day. Oh, I think so and so like what did he say? I think so and so is stalking me, and I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, she just looks at me like whenever I'm around, and he hadn't been in school since March, but she just looks at me whenever I come around, and he's like, I don't like her like that. Like, I don't like her. And I'm like, you're 10. You shouldn't be. Come on, man. I'm not ready for this stuff. Anyway, sorry. Side street.
That is amazing. No, you're good. Oh my goodness. But it was definitely for my internal side. I think reconciling myself with being gay took a longer period of time. Made me wrestle against my faith because I was trying to reconcile those in my mind by myself, as I mentioned before, because I didn't feel safe talking with anyone about it. Lake of Fire. So I think that was definitely harder from just my internal side. Now, the coming out side, definitely there were tears at both. Coming out, especially talking with my mom about it. I remember that conversation so well, coming out as gay, when she made like a joke or something like that. She made a small joke, nothing offensive on that side, but I just kind of leaned into it and was like, yeah, that's me. Or something along those lines. And she kind of was taken aback. This is on the phone, mind you. And she started crying and blah, blah, blah. And, it was a hard moment. And it took some time to kind of get with it. But over time, her solace was the fact that I was still a child of God, that the Lord made me the way that he meant to, and that I'm a nice person, a sweet person, the same person I've always been, etc. And so that's how she kind of reconciled it for herself. She didn't like that I went to Pride, for example, but not for the reason you think. At first, it started off with, well, why do you need a Pride, and why do you need this? And so we go into that a little bit, talking about the persecution, can't marry. And at this point, the marriage was still, Obergefell had not happened yet, talking about all that kind of stuff. But then later on, it was more along the lines of, I'm worried because people are ridiculous, and there's been violence that has broken out by assholes that will come out there to shoot or whatever else. And that became her primary concern versus, just the fact that we're having a Pride. But I think when I came out as atheist, that was a much harder experience, because the solace that she had of me being a child of God because I was gay was now being ripped away. So that comfort that she felt around it was now gone. And so that led a whole host of conversations around that topic, because now not only was I gay, but I was no longer a believer. And so, of course, destined for hell and everything else. And so she couldn't justify it in her own mind anymore, even though I was gay, I was going to go to heaven because I was such a good person, because now I'm atheist. So now that security blanket is gone.
Yeah.
And that took a lot for her to deal with. And I ended up coming out in a more roundabout way. I would start posting things on Facebook rather than having a direct conversation. I just post, I contemplated changing. So on Facebook, you have your religious status. You have that field.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I took like weeks to say, am I really going to change this to atheist? Like, this was like it was a huge decision, because I'm like, if I change it, then what if my cousins see it? They're
everybody's going to know.
My aunt's on Facebook. Yeah. Oh, like it's the drama, and everybody's going to find out. Do I really want this? And so I cowered out even of that and started posting that I was going to, atheists helping the homeless things, stuff like that. Just kind of roundabout ways of doing it. Once I became comfortable, months later, mind you, I finally changed it to atheist, and kind of just waited for the blowback to happen. Like, oh, who was going to see it? Oh, here it comes. I'm just waiting on it. But that's how that went. It was so much more thought that had to go into how to do it. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it was just like, let me just do this roundabout way. And then if it comes up in conversation, then we can elaborate on it. So it took time. It was definitely harder to come out as atheist on that side, because I was not as scared to, say that I was gay. Change that, my interest on Facebook, to say men, to start posting about pride stuff. I had less problem doing that than I did as far as posting atheist things and actually having that conversation with family.
Sure. Now, while we're talking sort of about minority experiences, I normally overly script, as you mentioned, my notes, my copious notes. I usually overly script everything, but I thought maybe we could just kind of get off the track here, and just wing it a little bit, and maybe get into some of the tough topics that are happening in our world right now. I've been thinking a lot about things in my life and my experience in the wake of George Floyd's murder, and the resulting social unrest. Mm-hmm. And I heard somebody say, and I wish I could remember who said it so that I could give some attribution. But basically the idea that Black is a minority in America. To be a Black atheist is to be a minority within the Black community. And I don't know, maybe being a Black gay atheist adds even more to the layers of the onion to that. Has that been your experience? Would you want to speak to that a little bit?
It definitely... trying to think of the way that I want to frame this particular... It definitely changes what you perceive to be your community. That's the way that I'll start with it. Because when you're talking about, you're being Black in the Black experience, there's a lot of things that people can kind of sympathize with. Some of the experiences that I've had as I'm walking down the street and I see someone, hold their purse a little closer or something like that, even though, I'm not close or not looking threatening, at least not to my knowledge, but they still, it's still, and you can see it. And it's one of those little subtle things that you just kind of get used to seeing, like, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Like, and I try to change my behavior to make people feel less threatened. Like, I'm a 6 foot, like 300 pound dude. And I've been that way since like high school. I was already about this height and 250 or something like that by that time. And so it's been a while, but when you start talking about, not being a non-believer, a lot of folks that are African-American look at that as, you're kind of betraying your race, so to speak, that you're not, like, something must have happened in your childhood or in your upbringing because this is not the way that you're supposed to be. And that attitude is changing a little bit. Maybe I'm just biased looking at, I watch people on YouTube that are African-American and are much more accepting over time. But that's still not something that's brought up. Like when I go home, for example, neither me being gay nor atheist is brought up in casual conversation.
Sure.
It does not happen.
Yep.
So a lot of people in my family know I do a lot of community service works with secular organizations. And they might say something like, "Oh, good job" on Facebook. Like if I post something like, "Oh, we did XYZ," and I have pictures, I may get a post from one or two people saying, "Oh, that's awesome," or blah blah blah. Other than that, nothing. Like there's no questions about. So, are you seeing anyone? Nope, doesn't happen. As far as I stopped getting questions about what church you attend. That question has dried up, which I appreciate over time, but it definitely seems isolating when you're talking with folks and you say that you're an atheist. I went to it was just like a 7-Eleven, like a convenience store or something, and having this conversation with the salesperson. She was an African American young lady, and I had on a Black non-believer shirt in particular. And we were talking, just kind of, yakking it up as, we're going through the checkout process, as you do, as some people do. Some people don't like that. Anyway, she saw the shirt and I saw she looked at it, like she kind of glanced and went on. Then she looked at it again with a little longer stare as I'm sitting there kind of watching her readying my card to pay. And her tone, her demeanor, everything about what she was the energy she was, presenting to me in the first part of that conversation just kind of dropped like a rock. And it was one of those things where it's like, oh, now she sees it. Oh dear, here we go. And so I kept a smile on my face and I was like, let me make sure, let me not make this awkward or anything else. And so I kept a smile and, tried to chat a little bit more, but I can tell that it rubbed her the wrong way. The fact that I had this shirt on that says that it just said non-believer. It didn't even say atheist. It just said, right. Black non-believers. But I can tell that it made a change in how she perceived of me. And so between my family, the way that they act, the fact that African Americans have such a higher probability of being religious, especially the elder Black folks, it makes it harder to kind of find your place unless you're talking about an issue that kind of brings you together to where that atheism is not like the subject. Then we can be together. But when you talk about being gay, you immediately have cast-offs. That part, because a lot of African Americans are still not comfortable with that in your family, and there will be degrading remarks and everything else regarding, those sissies or, whatever word you want to ascribe, those words will come out. Being atheist is that same way. It's just like Steve Harvey, for example, is, kind of an over top of the example when he had that interview. It was like, when you atheist, I don't really understand you. I'm paraphrasing here. Where do you find your moral barometer? Stuff like that. And the fact is, he's not alone in that thinking. It's such an integral part to the way that I grew up, to the way that my parents and my grandparents grew up, that to stray away from it means like kind of turning your back on all of this that was instilled in you, all the effort, all of the church programs and, F. Kojic on Saturday, Baptist church on Sunday type thing. Like all of that stuff was in vain. And it can change the way that people perceive you, especially in the African American community. And so it's definitely, you sense that isolation a little bit there. I can't talk about secular issues when I go home, so to speak, unless I frame it in a very certain way, because otherwise, it's going to be backlash and, we don't talk about that and da 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 da. And so it's just, it's been a very interesting experience being in the minority status and then getting kind of further marginalized as you feel you can't even express yourself in certain situations or be who you are. With people that you thought, were your community and would support you and blah, blah, blah. And that's not always there depending on what you're talking about.
Well, it's interesting. I think the key takeaway that I think I heard you say is that it's so much of the identity of being an African American in America is a religious identity, and if you try to separate those two, that's when things get kind of funky. And and I want to use that, maybe there's so much I want to come back to out of that, but I want to use that to maybe springboard into a conversation about the protests that are happening right now. So, well, and maybe I'll start by saying that, like, and I don't know if you'll agree with this, but this is my experience. Hey, atheist community broadly, at large, we have a diversity problem, and we need to, like, sit down and look that in the face. Our organization is only like a year and a half old. And so that's something that I'm conscious of, you know, making sure that we are being an inclusive and inviting organization. I don't know how well we're succeeding at that. But those are conversations that we're having and that we need to be having. But atheism is a bunch of white people, like a bunch of white dudes, and that's starting to change, right? I think we're seeing a change, especially with these younger generations coming up. But I say that to say this, and that is, like, we had some protests and marches and rallies and stuff here. And while our organization and the folks that are very active in it are obviously outwardly, you know, Black Lives Matter and trans and queer issues, and they're progressive people. They're supportive of all of these sort of progressive social things that shouldn't be progressive at all. They should just be things. And yet we heard that they struggled supporting this movement because these rallies are largely like, okay, well, we're going to black church. It's in the park, but the speakers are all pastors, and they're all, the church is just so baked into it that some of these folks have a hard time figuring out, you know, how do I be supportive? And I don't want to go to church. I don't want to go to anybody's church, but I support you. And I don't think, you know, police brutality is bullshit, and you shouldn't get shot just for, you know, sleeping in your own bed. Like, right. I want to be there for you. I want to support you, but I don't want to go to church. So that's a thing that I'm seeing, like, folks struggle with. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, or.
Yeah, I haven't seen that as much, but that it does come out when national tragedies happen or something like that. Who do you see on like CNN, stuff like that? You'll usually see, like, reverends, you know, you have your Al Sharptons or something like that. And some people will just talk to mega church pastors who are African American. You know, they'll be invited onto shows as if they are representations of the African American community. And it does, especially when they frame things in that religious context, it does kind of ostracize and makes atheists feel uncomfortable. I mean, myself included, in that, because when you start going, like, there's one thing, even if somebody is a reverend, but they're saying something that's good and worth hearing and touching on the subject the way that it needs to be, that's fine. But when they start injecting other pieces into it, it's like, do we really need that? But they are held up as the models, as the representatives that are out there. And, you know, there's lots of ways to lend support to the movement. There's lots of ways to support these efforts that are out there. And I think that is a problem. A lot of people kind of don't know where to begin on that side. But, you know, just going out, being out if you can, because not everybody can be out right now. It's not feasible for everyone to do so. And don't feel bad about that if you're in that category. You have to find another way to lend your voice or lift up the voices of people that are out there, that are pushing this movement, you know, whether it's sharing the live feed to get that to more people on your feed to see that these protests are happening, or sharing a inspirational video that was posted on YouTube by an African American that's talking about these issues in a way that moves you. You know, it's using what's at your disposal to have, if you're really wanting to, and you're really feeling some kind of way about it, finding your best way of doing so is going to be important. And that's different for everyone. I can't sit here and dictate, well, you need to go down there and you need to do X, Y, Z, because that's what you need to do. Like, it's not like that. But lifting up the voices of those in the community, even those that are in the African American secular community that are talking about this, because there's been a lot of folks that have been out there giving talks. Like just this past Monday, I think it was, I can't even remember the the day, but earlier in June, RFR, we had on Mandisa Thomas and Candace Gorham talking about these type of issues, and it was an amazing conversation. And sharing that out, and like that conversation, like when you were talking earlier about the atheist movement and the fact that there is a diversity problem. I was on a podcast along with several other awesome folks, including Mandisa and Will Judy, on the Thinking Atheist. This was back in February of 2020, where we talked about that particular issue. But in these current times, to make things short, because I can talk, it's going out, like, hopefully it's not in the church. Like there's been a lot of gatherings that have not been in church. They've just been on the streets in certain places, stuff like that. You may have somebody that stands to pray or something like that. Yes, it might happen on that side, and I understand that discomfort of not wanting to be around that aspect, because I don't want to be either. Let's be clear. But remember the larger goal at play. Like, remember what it is that you're out there for, what you're passionate about, what you're trying to fight for, and what you're trying to lift up while you're out there. There may be some moments of uncomfortability. I'm not going to say to go into a church. For some people, that is a traumatic thing.
Yes. For
them, that brings up memories that they don't want to be rehashed. Understood.
Yep.
And if that happens, step back a little bit on that side and participate when they're out there marching, because that seems to be the larger framework that I'm seeing when I'm looking at posts and things on Facebook. Are people out in the streets together, lifting their voices together and saying that this cannot continue the way that it has been, that we will not tolerate this, that this needs to change. This systemic issue needs to be addressed in a meaningful way, not in the BS ways or platitudes or just inaction that has happened in the past when these types of issues have arose.
For sure. I'm thinking, like, when we talk about, going to these rallies. So I went to one here in town, here in Haines City. Not very heavily attended, surprisingly. The one in Lakeland, of course, was much bigger. Both of them, they had two. And it was, it was a very diverse gathering of people who came out, which was fantastic. I wish I could say the same for the one in Haines City. It was we had needed to have some more people get out there, and I don't know if it was just an advertising thing of people just didn't know about it. I only found out about it through one of the political, I don't know how I want to say it. One of the political groups was set up doing registering people to vote. And so I saw on Facebook that they were going to be there, and I was like, "Oh, they're there. I'm going." But I didn't see it anywhere else other than that one place. So I don't know. There could be other things in that too. And that one for me was not churchy. And when it did get a little churchy, I tried to remind myself that, like, look, I was trained as a child that our cultures are different and incompatible. And I am glad that I moved away from that one-horse hick town and, like, met some people who look different than me and talk different from me and are different from me, because I'm sure that helped me in my own, like, trans experience too, and relating to people. But, like, I mean, man, and this is stuff that I'm sorry for, and that I'm conscious of when I raise my kids. I mean, I was taught, you talk about, let's go back to, you're walking down the street and somebody holds their purse a little closer. I was taught, whether directly or indirectly, that you were to be feared. That's just what I was taught. And it was wrong. And I hate it. Like, I can still remember we lived in this small hick town, and about 45 minutes away was Decatur, Illinois. which is a agricultural town. ADM Staley's, they had a Firestone plant, Caterpillar plant, and I can remember, like, we would turn down Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and the doors would lock. I remember this stuff from as a kid, and I don't remember much. I have a bad memory, but like, we were in the neighborhood then, and this is the shit that like shaped my child, like my vision of what other people were like. None of these people were going to come up to our car and do anything. Definitely not at 10 o'clock in the morning on it. You know what I mean? Like, come on. But that's the kind of stuff that happened. And so there was this training that happened. And look, man, my dad is still pretty racist. We were just talking to him last night on the phone or the day before. And I said something about, we were talking about people in Florida. I don't know if you've probably seen this on the news. But our unemployment system is garbage because Rick Scott left it in shambles before he went to Washington.
Yeah, I have heard about that.
So we still have people waiting to get their checks. And I heard on Andrew Yang's podcast this fantastic idea to create a citizen dashboard. I don't know if you've heard about this, but the idea is every American has a login to citizen.us or whatever it is, and you go log in, and from there, you'd have an account, right? And so all of the interactions that you have with the government would be in this dashboard. And the idea is like, well, we were going to give people stimulus money, but we're using last year's tax returns, and there are people who didn't file tax returns because they didn't earn enough income and they didn't have, for whatever reason. And so that's really a bad method for getting people their money. Imagine if you had this citizens dashboard where you could just, like, the government just clicks the button and the money drops into your citizens account, and then you log in and transfer it to your bank. Like, there are all of these like forward ideas of how we can not have to go through this ever again. So we're talking about that, and my dad says, well, your Democrats want to give the illegals money too. Like, man, I'm not having this conversation right now. I'm really not, because fine. If it means that everybody gets some help, then fine, do it. I don't care. Like, let's help people. Can we just help people and not do this divisive bullshit? Oh, it was so frustrating.
Good night. I couldn't even imagine.
To see this still, like, so it's a good reminder to me of like where I came from. I moved away. I came to Orlando in the Disney bubble where diversity reigns supreme. And I'm learning my way out of it, and I'm teaching my kids differently. And I think, I don't know where the hell I was going in this story, but I think the end of that road is like, when I look at these kids, when I look at the kids my son goes to school with, I see change coming. I see less of that. And I know that some of that is that I'm in a more populated area now, and that same bullshit is still going on back home where I grew up. And a lot of those people didn't move away. But that, looking at those younger generations is, you know, it gives me hope for the future that we will overcome this stuff, as long as once the rest of us just get out of the way and let it happen. You know, when my folks, right, step aside and let the younger generations drive for a little while, we'll take leaps ahead. I don't know where I was going with that.
I'm definitely hoping for those prejudices that are taught, those small pieces help to perpetuate, you know, this systemic racism that we see in the U.S. And, you know, I say that I see people now after just cringing, like, oh, what are you saying? What are you saying? Get out of here. You were doing so well up to this point.
No. Real talk.
But that's the thing. Like, even taking someone that, you know, was raised to fear, you know, a black male, to say that this person may want to do you harm a little bit more.
Yep.
than other folks, whether that be the locking of the doors, as you were talking about, as you go down certain streets, or holding the purse closer because you think that, oh, well, this person might try to get me, is out to get me.
Yep.
And when you pass by someone else, maybe someone who's white or whatever else, that's not your instant reaction. But those little prejudices add up, and say that someone that feels that way gets into a position of power. So they become a judge, or they become someone in law enforcement, or they become a politician that's making laws to target certain things. Those little prejudices may affect the way a judge looks at a defendant when thinking about a sentence, for example, to say that this person is a little more dangerous than someone else, even though it may be the same crime. Like, they may not even consciously think about it, but it factors into their frame of thought as they're coming up with their determination. Those little pieces can still be there. If they haven't been combated in a meaningful way, if they haven't actually been explored so that they can start getting past those preconceived notions of how dangerous or how risky this person is just because of how they look, then it can manifest in ways that help to perpetuate the system. And on a recent podcast, I was on the Right to Reason podcast, and I kind of used this example just as a very small way of explaining the systemic racism portion and how those can kind of factor in together. So take Amy Cooper, for example, which was one of the recent cases up in New York, if I'm not mistaken, where she had her dog off the leash. If you're not familiar with the story, if you're living under a rock, dog off the leash in a part of the park that was not allowed. And she was approached by an African-American male, Christian was his name, to say, essentially, hey, you have to put your dog on a leash if you're going to be in this part. Now, back and forth ensued, but let me bring up the quote here, because I did have that particular quote. Now, he started recording as she started threatening him, and she said this phrase in particular: "I'm going to call the police and say an African-American man threatened my life." Now, end quote. For her to make that point, for her to say that statement, is dependent on the existence of this systemic racism structure, this hierarchy that is in place. And let me explain a little bit why. To make that threat means that she recognized what her position was in this hierarchy, to know that if she called the police, that her as a white woman would be taken seriously, that they would have more care regarding what she had to say about the situation and want to protect her. It also, she depended on Christian knowing his place in this hierarchy too. And the reason why I say that is because to say it means she depended on him knowing that if she made this call to say those words as a white woman and that an African-American man is threatening my life, she depended on him to know that his life would be in danger if she said that phrase. If she told the police that his life would be in danger, because she used this as a threat. Before she even made the call, she said this. And that phrase would have no power if this systemic structure wasn't already in place. And, Christian still recorded it and, recorded while she was on the phone, and becoming increasingly apprehensive as she was talking on the phone, saying that this person was threatening her life. Meanwhile, of course, he's just recording from a distance that whole time. But it's a small example of how this systemic structure affects you, because after everything was all over and the video came out, of course, Amy issued apologies and goodness, this isn't me, and goodness, this, I would never, blah blah blah, I'm not racist, etc. Because in her normal course of business, she may not be that racist, but she was aware of her position in this structure. She knew what his position was and counted on him to know where he fell in that, and use that to her advantage to make this threat in the first place. And so that's what I kind of tried to illustrate, the fact that this system exists even if you may not say or do anything about it 90% of the time, but in that small moment, she relied on that system to issue a threat to get this person to try to back off. He didn't back off, and luckily, when the police arrived, there wasn't shooting and everything else that could have happened. That she knew might be a possibility, or else she wouldn't have set the threat in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's one thing to say that, oh, I'm gonna call the police, because people say that, you know, you're in the store, you won't leave. I'm gonna call the police if you don't get out of here, blah, blah, blah. But to say I'm gonna call the police and tell them that I was being threatened by an African-American male raises the stakes a little bit. It shows her reliance on that system being in place. And so I can go long-winded into the historical side, but I do suggest for people that want a little more information to look up a documentary. It's called Holy Hierarchy by Jeremiah Kamara. And it goes a lot, it specifically looks at the U.S. and the history of how these laws were enshrined into place, going back to like the 1600s, as you put into people's minds that this is the way that things should be, and sowing that prejudice not only in word of mouth and anecdotal type of ways, but actually enshrining it in law to say that, you know, a black person can never raise their hand to a white person, even in the means of self-defense, for example. It doesn't matter what the situation is. You're not allowed to, because the idea was you're less than. You're not qualified. You don't have the intelligence to even do that at all. So no, you can't defend yourself because the white people know better.
Yeah.
And all these things were enshrined year over year. And from redlining back in the mid 90s, that concentrated wealth in white neighborhoods and labeled colored populations, as they were called back then, these neighborhoods of people of color, as risky investments. So not to put the mortgage money there, put it in these other neighborhoods that were less, that had less people of color in them, stuff like that. And on it goes. It's a long path to look at and to research. And there's so much that has gone into it. And it takes time. It takes effort. And when it comes to understanding, when you go to that one black person that you got, your friend, and say, can you explain this to me? You know, it's sometimes somebody might be willing to do it, but that is a daunting task that you're asking someone to go. And they may not be ready for that
history.
Right. It's so much that can be there. And it's like, you know, you do a little bit of your own research coming up to this, keep an open mind and take a look at what's there. But
well, and you said something earlier too about, you know, resharing and retweeting and uplifting Black voices. And you know, there are a lot of good things going around that do sort of color in some of that history. You know, just even from little stuff like, and I call it little stuff, and there you go. But like in talking to some of my Black friends, the idea that you had to be taught as a child, multiple sessions, taught as a child, this is how you get home safe at the end of the day. You get pulled over, you keep your hands on the steering wheel. Yes, sir, no, sir, that kind of stuff I got. The you know, be polite to the police. But like the don't wear your hoodie, don't wear a wife beater, don't go without a shirt, don't let your pants sag, don't have your music up too loud, don't be in this wrong part of town at this certain time. All of that kind of stuff that I grew up never knowing was happening. That's the shame, I think, for me. And when I think about like, oh, what am I doing with my kids? That's some of the kind of stuff that I want to correct. I want them to know that their Black friends are being taught, are having to be taught, this is how you survive a police encounter. And you don't get taught that because you don't have to worry about it, and that's your privilege. And you have to work to make that not be a thing anymore. So there's stuff like that I think, you know, that's being shared around, that I think is useful, that will, you know, help people learn and grow. Another one is, I'm sure you've heard this, a lot of times, and this kind of goes back to the idea of how can I go support this movement when the protest in the park is essentially a church service? And and then inevitably the question will come up like, I just don't understand how these people can be, and quote unquote, how these people can be so beholden to the god of the old slave master, to the religion of the slave. I'm sure you've heard that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
There's a lot out there. There's a lot of misunderstandings. There's a lot of conversations that, like.
And it's not just that it's not a conversation worth having. It takes research to look and see how integral the church play, even in times of the civil rights movement, as far as having a meeting, what hall could African Americans rent out, in certain places that wouldn't be denied by whoever owned that property, saying, no, you can't meet here, versus, we can go to the church house that we own, that, that this is our spot and we can actually meet in here. And so a lot of those meetings did take place in church.
Sure.
That's not to say that there weren't atheists, of course. In that movement, in particular in the civil rights movement, but it played such a heavy role, and it just kind of kept going from generation to generation. As like, even my upbringing, it was, we're doing this every single weekend. Like, we're going here every single weekend. Get ready to just, like, don't fight it. I don't want to hear it. Get your end up.
Because
we're going.
It's the community. It's the support system, right? That's what I'm hearing is that it sort of evolved into just that integral part of the culture that provided that backbone, the support structure of having community.
Yeah, at least that's now I would have a little bit of dispute as far as how much community would come out of it. That's definitely the appearance, what you just said.
Okay.
That's definitely the way that it's built. Like, you can always find a home here and blah, blah, blah. But, as you see things over time and you see little schisms happen when someone does something that someone else doesn't like, all of a sudden those, office politics or group politics come right into play. And then all of a sudden, boom, people are leaving and everything else. Like, there was a situation some time ago, it was years ago, where there was a church in my community that did not want, like, women to be in those positions of leadership.
Right.
For example. Now, that drove a lot of folks away, because a lot of black women are the main church goer. And that's the best way to put it. They're the ones that would drag the husbands and the children on, or whatever else. And so that rubbed people the wrong way. And I remember that there was a schism that happened because of that. Things have changed a little bit, but that was an issue that cropped up. Can't have a woman as a pastor, and no, you can't have that. And so those old misogynistic ways were coming right there to roost, even in this minority community that was sitting here. And sure enough, there it was.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of problems that are out there that are not as talked about, especially on mainstream media. That's not something that you hear a lot about, because it would create a lot of backlash. You would have bishops, Bishop T.D. Jakes or whomever, Creflo Dollar, whoever would come out and be like, no, that's not what we do here, and blah, blah, blah. And you would have all of this backlash from a large sector of African Americans who do feel that this is the right place, that they do all the right things, at least on the surface. And this is the place to be. This is where you grow and you find God and everything else, even though all of these, these undertows are sitting there of a lot of issues that are sitting in the background, and people are falling away, especially younger folk, as churches take stands against gay people, against folks that are trans, and starting to basically fight against that curve. As people kind of fall away, churches are trying to adjust to a degree, because survival.
Right.
How you gonna ensure your survival if you can't get the young people to keep coming back? So that's a risk.
And churches have been doing that since church.
Oh yeah,
that evolution.
You gotta protect that income.
Yeah.
Like, got to protect those tithes and offerings.
Well, I think my advice had been, and feel free to correct me or add to or change, on the idea of like, how do I go support this movement? It's church. Is that it? To your point, there are other things that you can do, but if you can set that difference aside for the moment, right? If the idea that we're trying to promote is equality and justice, and so we've got to come together on the things that we agree on and set aside some differences here and there in order to get done the things that need to get done. I often say, like in our organization, like Street Warriors, I mentioned at the top of the show, is a religious sort of based homeless outreach program. And we said from the start, like, maybe you don't, maybe your church or your organization doesn't believe that women should be church leaders. I can set that aside for the moment and work together with you on something we do agree on. And in this case, if it's homelessness, then let's go combat homelessness. And maybe that opens the door into the future of having a conversation down the road about what we do disagree about in a way that's not combative and confrontational. That you're building relationships with those people with whom you disagree over the things on which you do agree, in order to help people and get good things done. And so that's sort of what I try to foster in our own community, at least.
Yeah, it's definitely a fine wine, a fine wine. Good night, a fine line to walk.
It is,
because when you talk about what egregious
where's
action
the line?
is too much, that you can't do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
But for the most part, from what I've seen, a lot of these gatherings, even if they take place in a church, like the purpose is for this movement, for this particular issue, to actually get something done and change. If it's on a local level, on the city or county level, state or the federal level, is the goal overall. But no, that's the overarching goal. And so that's why I said earlier in the show to keep your focus on that goal. Yes. Like, this is the issue that's going on. This is the issue that's before us. This is what has gotten people so infuriated, so angry after so many years of things happening and justice not being served. People, something happens and the DA decides, oh, no charges here. I think we're good. Or, they're initially charged and they take them before the grand jury, who's going to do the deciding factor for the indictment. The grand jury is like, not, we're good here. Yeah. And tossed to the side, as those things keep happening and people keep not being held accountable for those actions, like it boils up. And so the fury and the anger that I see out in people's faces and the YouTube videos that I've seen, it's like, I can understand it because it's just been so long. Yeah. It's been so long with so much inaction. It's like, something, it rises up and all the protests start, then it dies down.
Yeah.
And a couple months later, here we are again. Like we're back at that same forefront. And so when people are getting to the point to say, enough is enough, we're needing some real change and, putting that message out there in a more forceful way, it's like, I can't sit there and be mad at them, because what choice have folks been given as far as what's happened in the past? Like, what has actually gone on in the past that says that the justice system will actually deliver its namesake justice in this case? Do I have confidence? So the people, for George Floyd's case, they were charged, and that's progress. Like, let me be quite clear. That's progress, because that's already a fight in and of itself. Are they actually going to get charged? That was a big thing that was going on. But the next thing is, well, what's going to happen in their trial? Are they actually going to get convicted? If they get convicted, what kind of sentence are they going to get? Like for the young man was in Dallas that the police officer, it was a white woman law enforcement officer who went into the wrong apartment.
Yeah.
And as he was on his couch eating ice cream, he got shot. So there was a big fervor about that, because of course because you can't even be safe in your own home eating ice cream on your own couch. Right. Anyway, Was very pissed off at that.
Yep.
But when it came to the sentencing, she got, I think it was, 10 years or something? It was something like that. It was like 10 years, and she has the ability to get off early on probation or good behavior. And so I believe the last time that I looked at it, I could be wrong, but potentially 2.5 years, she could potentially be out again if things work favorably for her. And it's just, how does that jive? Like, how do you expect people to take that? To be happy about that, like to think that that's actually progress, right, when the young man is still dead.
Yeah.
His family's never going to get him back, and she may be out in a couple years, and no harm, no foul. And she may even get hired by another police department, because that's what a lot of folks do. They get in trouble and they shift to another police department. And so I will say, like, when it comes to the supporting aspect of things, like, keeping your eye on the goal, making sure you're lifting up those voices is an important thing. But if the only time you're lifting up your voice on your own platform is to say what you don't like, or that no, I don't want this done this way, they need to change the way they're doing that, etc. If that is the main way you're utilizing your voice, then I have to question how much you actually want this change, because usually that follows it. Like, I support this, and I support the protest, and but X, Y, Z, and like I said, if
now let me white splain for a little bit.
Yeah. It's one thing to disagree, because people are always going to disagree. Like, we're humans. Like, we have individual motives. We have individual outlooks on what's happening in the world. Of course. But as I said, if mostly what you're doing is raising your voice in opposition to things that you don't like, versus actually propping up and raising the voices of the situation itself and the thing that you say you care about in those derisive posts, but the thing you say you care about, if you're not sharing that the most and uplifting that, then you have to re-examine what you're actually after here. Because if all I'm hearing from you is things I don't like, it's just like, bruh, you need to examine what you're doing here, or what you actually want, because your actions are not matching what you purportedly care about. Like, that's not what I'm seeing from you. And people might disagree with that, whatever, but there's been people even on my Facebook wall that almost everything I see is something negative about what's going on. There's just something that they shouldn't be doing, and I can't believe they would use that word, and and it's just like, wow, I'm so glad that you're comfy at the house saying all this kind of stuff, but there's a larger situation in hand. Keep your eye on the ball. Keep your focus. And if you're having trouble keeping your focus, you need to examine why you're having trouble keeping that focus. Because even sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was about to say, because even with everything that's going on, even with the things that I disagree with, that I'm seeing, my focus is clear. It has not changed in the slightest. And so even though I may make a post here and there about, this is something that isn't great, or this is something that I don't like, my focus and the main thing that you will see me posting is furthering this message and making sure that gets heard. Because otherwise, when this dies down, because it always is going to die down, like that's what history shows. Over time, people get tired, and then it lulls back down. All we're doing at that point is waiting for the next event to happen, for it to roll right back up again, and we're at the same spot that we are now. So if people are wanting to stop this type of thing from happening, these protests and everything else from going on, then make sure you're lifting those voices up, and so we can nip this problem. Like, it's going to take a while. It's not going to be a short thing. But if you're not helping to squash the issue that's prompting the protest in the first place, then you're just biding your time till the next one happens, and you can voice your concern once that one happens as well, without doing anything to really move that conversation forward and get some meaningful legislation and changes in law enforcement passed that can hopefully lower, if not eliminate, these types of protests from even being needed in the first place.
Absolutely. Let's leave it at that. I think that's a good place to end it. But I want to keep that conversation going. I want to keep this open. Anybody who's out there watching, if you want to be a part of this conversation, there was a really good takeaway I had from the rally here, and I know this isn't the first time I've heard it, but come on, let's make it the last. That this doesn't. We need to make sure that this isn't just another moment. This has to be a movement. We have to do something with this. To your point, the systemic changes that need to take place. And so I want to be a part of that. I know a lot of the folks in the atheist community of Polk County are on board with that. And so I want to keep the conversation open. I want to keep talking about how we can best jump into this and help make the solutions happen. And so obviously I would love to have you back on anytime you'd like to talk about anything you'd like to talk about, because man, I could talk to you all day and you could talk all day. Yeah. And I love it. I love that. So to wrap up then, let's just kind of highlight quickly some of the organizations that you work with. We mentioned some of them at the top. So let's start with, well, no, you pick. Where do you want to start? Pick an organization and tell me a little bit about it and what you do. And
Sure. Like I, as some people might know, if you know me in the past, I am never one to shy away from the community service aspect, because that's what I love to do. That's the reason I entered the secular community in the first place, was for volunteerism in general. And so I love it. Like, yes. I'm always down. So, I mean, for certain things, like for Austin Atheists Helping the Homeless, which is the shirt I'm wearing right now, which I love, courtesy of Foundation Beyond Belief, BT dubs. We had to change up the way that we were going at. So we go out every month to give out supplies to folks in the downtown Austin area. So this is ranging from 160 to 300 folks per time. So we do it once a month, first Sunday of every month. We're there like clockwork. And we've had to change things up. We've had to limit how many people can be out there. Yeah. But it's when we got the message, because we were considering canceling altogether, because it's like, the COVID's out there. This was back in March, and we were trying to decide what April was going to be. And we started getting word that a lot of the organizations that provide food to those experiencing homelessness close for right now, like temporarily close their kitchens and everything else, because it was just too hard to work around the restrictions about how many people can be involved, etc. And so we were just like, okay, are we going to do this? And how can we get this together? And so we started making everything more food focused. And so rather than things focusing like on hygiene supplies, which will still include toothbrushes and everything else, we started shifting more towards prepackaged foods and having more of that available in case there's longer spans of time before people can get a decent meal from one of these outreach efforts that are there and normally operate during the week, for example. And so that's been one of the adjustments that we've made, and we still haven't missed a month. Like, we've been going, it's been 10 years now, like over 10 years since September of 2009 was that initial giveaway. And so we had our 10th anniversary last year.
That's awesome.
And it's still been rolling on even through this portion where a lot of people have stopped for legitimate concerns. Like, there's nothing to downplay there. There are legitimate concerns, but it was one of those things that us organizers, we were like, we gotta go. Like, we gotta get out there. Like, there's like, how can we not right now? So let's figure out how we're going to do that. And so we got some lovely gear, like masks and things from different parties around Austin, and gloves. And we jump right in. So it's been a good effort on that side, but also things like recovering from religion.
Yep.
A lot of what we do, like most of it, like people might know about the hotline, the 184 I Doubt It hotline for people to call in that have questions or need assistance on that side. But the other part of RFR was like support groups, where we have local support groups in places that gather up to talk about and go through their feelings of coming out and dealing with a lot of that trauma that they're experiencing on that side. All that canceled, like all that stopped. And so
everybody get a Zoom account quick. Everybody sign up for Zoom.
That's exactly what it was. Like we
did
have
it.
Like, we have multiple Zoom sessions now to where every support group that wants to have a meeting can schedule their time on there and jump on there. But we also started the RFR X series, where we have on people. So we started off more so with Daryl Ray talking about how the COVID-19 is affecting people on the mental side, like how you can keep your mental health during this time. We moved on to Hector Garcia, and now, as I said, it was just last week we had on Candace Gorman Mandisa Thomas talking about African American issues and how those stresses and the trauma of these kind of situations that we're dealing with now with the protests and George Floyd are affecting the African American community and how that trauma can manifest. And it was just a wonderful talk, stuff like that. And so these are every single Monday at 7 p.m. Central, and that are open to the public that people can go in. But we've had almost like 100 people in there. Like Mandisa and Candace set the record for the most amount of people that attended in there. We hit just below 100. I think it was like 98 or 99 was the highest concurrent viewership that I saw, that were just people dialed into Zoom to hear what they had to say. Wow. But with Foundation Beyond Belief, we are starting up some efforts, from fundraising efforts, because that is what FBB does, along with the local BBN teams. We have some things in the works to start mobilizing those local groups that are spread out around the U.S. to try to have an impact on that side and getting some of those gears in motion. And so that will be forthcoming. But even down here, like the local group, the Freethinkers Association of Central Texas down here in San Antonio, we bought a Zoom room because of course we did.
Yep.
Because of course we did. And starting to host, book clubs and trying to keep people engaged, because a lot of people are separate. We don't know how a lot of folks are doing mental health wise, whether they lost their job or not. There's been some reports about that. And so trying to figure out ways to help people in our local community, because that's one thing that I think the secular community needs more of, is with churches, that was supposed to be your built-in safeguard, your community that you can go on to rely on. And that's not something you get a lot of. Like, people don't expect that of secular organizations because it's not a normal thing you see. And so I really want that aspect to change, because we should be able to provide that community, not just, a social space to party or to, have a lecture or something like that, but to say, hey, something's wrong. And I can reach out to this community to say, hey, I have XYZ going on. Is there something that we can do? And just like churches, it may not be a lot that, budget wise, not everybody got the money like that to just be doing whatever. But to actually be a resource on that side, to actually provide some support there locally, and to be counted on as, hey, we're here for you. We're a secular organization. And it's a niche that I don't think is being filled enough in the secular community. And I really would like to see that expand on that side, especially with the local, like the smaller local groups that can do that. I mean, the national ones, like that's a little harder to see. They can do big programs, like all that kind of stuff. But the local groups, because there's a lot of local groups that are around, but it's like, if somebody needed help, who would come to this local sector? Who would even have that expectation that they could find help there? And I think that part is not explored enough.
That is so much of what we have been trying to build. And you're right. One of the biggest frustrations is funds. Like I hate to pass the plate. I hate to have, I did a goofy thing on our cleanup on this past Sunday, where I went on Facebook Live in our private Facebook group and mocked up a Southern preacher and talked about, our Sunday morning trash cleaning service, and y'all pass the plate around and get us some donations. But that, it feels dirty to me, because it's hard if I have a specific thing that I'm raising money for. Like, we do fundraisers for the Hearth Project, which is a program in our public school system that helps provide supplies and such to students in our public schools who are experiencing homelessness or in transition. And so I can go to you and say, hey, kick $10 in the can because it's going to go to this. And that's easy for me. But to be like, hi, we have operating expenses and, I got to pay for the website this month. And that's a little harder of an ask for me to do. You're right. The church has this structure that, if we had somebody who was on a payroll that didn't have to, and you know how this is. I got a day job, which my day job is third shift, so it's not even a day job. I'm trying to sleep when everybody else is trying to work. And then I've got all this volunteer stuff going on, and I've got kids that I'm raising, and I have a family that I want to spend time with. and it's just, there's so many things pulling you in all of these different directions. My God, if I could just focus and dedicate my energy on this thing, and this is the ADHD in me maybe, but but man, if I could just focus on one damn thing, maybe we could get some stuff done. And a lot of it, you're right, a lot of it comes down to funding, and there are volunteers, people are interested, people want to do the work and be involved, and so if you're out there and you're a part of a local community, whether it's ours or not, think about that recurring monthly donation. Think about that membership if they offer it, and ask just, hey, is there something I can do to help? If it's bringing cookies to the social whenever we can have meetups again. If it's we're having our monthly lecture series and we need somebody to bring cookies, like that kind of stuff. It takes all types.
It really does. It really does. And it's, every small bit helps, especially with local communities. Like, it's just, it's one thing if we on the national stage and you're like this big organization, you can, haul in whatever, you might get, but for local groups and you're trying to do projects and it's like, it's a lot to ask for. And I understand that frustration, like just the getting comfortable with the ask itself is daunting in itself, because it seems like you're kind of beating a dead horse after a while. And it's just like, every time
am I asking too often? Am I asking too much? Yeah,
it's a lot, but it's necessary if we want these communities to be what we want them to be, which is, these actual communities that we can rely on. Because when people leave their religious structures, they're leaving that structure behind. And honestly, that's what leads to a lot of hesitation on that side. A lot of people miss that community aspect, not just the getting together, but being able to rely on this community in times of strain and actually find that support there as well. And so it's so much more to do. And local groups are so important too, that type of thing. But when you talked about, being able to focus on it full time, like I know that like Mandisa, Black Nonbelievers, just went that route, just a year, maybe a little bit more than that, where she actually decided to dedicate herself full time and having to raise money to support that so she can be out there and, lead that organization. It's so hard. So I will give a small plug for if anyone is interested, even during this time while the protests and everything going on, because like the Charlotte Black Nonbelievers group has been fairly active out there during these protests and going out for the bail portions that I've like Tina Marshall has been there right at the jailhouse. Right as people are getting out, stuff like that. It's been incredible. So for Black Nonbelievers, if you haven't heard of them, now you have.
Yes.
And they're an awesome organizations to support as well. Like, I should pimp my own pieces that I'm like directly involved in, but like all of us, like there's so much good work going around, but I always have to throw a plug in for my BN side on there. So
yes, and we love Mandisa. I'm gonna try to get her in on the show sometime soon. We were gonna have her try to come down and talk to us when we were doing normal things and getting together in groups, and now we can't do any of that anymore. It's so frustrating.
When life returns to normal,
man. Well, anyway, again, I could talk to you all day long, and so we'll do it again. But do you want people to look you up, to reach out to you? Do you just no? They can, if they want to reach out to you, they can send me an email and I'll ask you questions on their behalf. And the next time we get together, what do you think? What do you want to do?
For sure. I need to actually get like Twitter and all the other kind of things.
Don't go to Twitter. Don't do Twitter. You think Twitter. YouTube comments are bad? Wow.
Oh goodness. My friend was telling me about that, like, oh, you should get a Twitter. And I'm like, I'm not really feeling it. I don't know how I feel about that. But I would say the best way to get in contact with me is probably like going through like Austin Atheists Helping the Homeless, for example, like that, finding us on Facebook or going to the website, something like that. All that stuff comes to me and the other organizational heads. And so if you want to get in contact, that's probably the easiest way to find me on that side, because sending an email like, through Foundation Beyond Belief and Recovering from Religion, that may take a little longer to filter through and get to me. But yeah, for Austin Atheists Helping the Homeless, if you look that up, you can get a hold of me. And if you're interested in doing something like that in your own neck of the woods, and like people have reached out wanting to start that type of thing, and I'm like, yes, let me tell you the tips and tricks that we've done over time, because we've sent supplies to other groups that have wanted to do this type of thing because they were low or didn't get enough donations or something like that. Like, there's different things that we try to help facilitate, because for me, one of my passions is getting community service on the minds of secular folks and secular groups as a way not only to do effective activism in your local community, but also to help change the narrative around what an atheist is, what an atheist is actually about in this world, because there's so many preconceived notions. And goodness, I'm talking so much. I told you,
Phil,
let me just step away.
Phil, I'm laughing because my Atheist Community of Polk County people have heard this story before. If I preach, this is what I preach. We're gonna go out and do good things. We're gonna go out and do good things in the community, and we're gonna show people that we're not baby-eating monsters, and we're just your neighbors, and we're good people like you, and we're gonna go help other people, and we're gonna change the narrative. Yeah, people have heard this. Hey, but you
just heard it again,
man. So. Let's make a date to do a brainstorming session. Maybe I can get the board together on a Zoom call, and because we're dying to do more, and would love to pick your brain about some ideas, some things that you've seen done that that can be templated and used in other places. I think that'd be fun. And if you are someone involved in a local group and you're not affiliated with the Beyond Belief Network, just do it. I don't know why you're not. That was one of the very first things that we did when we started, getting out and doing our volunteering community service projects up off the ground. And they have been fantastic in helping us promote the things that we're doing, in recognizing us, in supporting us through all of those things. And so I absolutely love Foundation Beyond Belief and the support that they give us. It's just fantastic.
For sure. Like the BBN program, which is I love. Like, you can also be eligible for grants. This shirt was a part of that effort there. Hello.
Yep.
It's just one of those things. I have it on backwards right now because the Foundation Beyond Belief tree is on the other side, but I want it this side.
I got mine.
Oh, nice.
Wow. We didn't plan this, y'all. Really we didn't plan this.
Like, not at all. Like, no. Really not.
No, for real.
It's really awesome. But yeah, if it's a local group that you have out there that wants to get out, even if it's just, doing an Adopt a Street program or adopt a spot, like that's what Austin has, where you clean bus stations, that type of thing, like very specific bus station area. San Antonio has it in some form, like a lot of people have, but it's a part of the Keep America Beautiful, Keep Texas Beautiful, it's that whole chain that's there. But when you do some work on that side, then you can get things like shirts. You can qualify to ask for grants if you have a special project. So there's different levels that are into it. And it's a nice way to support that local community, which is what I really wanted to help foster when I joined FBB last year in 2019, is that BBN program to be a little more robust in providing that support to local groups, because that is where the work really is done. Yeah. Right there on the floor, on the ground floor, should I say?
Yep. And I mean, globally, like they're doing work. There is work being done all around the world in places.
Even our Ghana program. Good night.
Yeah. All right, so we'll put a pin in this. We'll make a date to come back and talk more. Oh, I absolutely love it. Phil, thanks so much for joining me and talking about all of this stuff, the hard stuff, the fun stuff. I love it, and I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, it was awesome being here, Sarah. I really appreciate the invite. It was an awesome conversation. I love things like this. Like, it's cool.
Great, awesome. I appreciate it. All right, so that is going to do it for us for this episode of Freethought in Florida. Just a reminder again, our weekend events. If you want to get involved with the Atheist Community of Polk County, we've restarted these select in-person events, pending potential COVID changes, but you can stay tuned here or to the Facebook for information on any changes that might come up with that. But we're doing Street Warriors on Saturday mornings. We're doing roadway cleanups on Sunday mornings. Every other weekend, we're working with It Takes a Village, trying to do some good things in the community. I won't preach to you about that again. You've heard it twice now. So that's it for us on this June 16th, 2020 in Freethought in Florida. We'll see you next time.